All right, well, we're almost to the point that we can do some wiring on our cafe build here, and so I got to get all of this straightened up and put on that bike. And a lot of folks do just bare bones, but I like to have the safety switches and things still on the bike because my boys ride them as well. And so things like the side stand switch and the clutch and the neutral and all that stuff I like to keep on there, so I'm going to use a lot of that. But one of the things that folks run into with builds like this one, where it's like parts from a box, things like that, is that you don't really know what you're working with. You don't know if the TCI is good. You don't know, if you're going to get spark. You don't know what you got going on. You don't know how the coils are oriented sometimes because the manuals are wrong. And so what I want to do is just take a minute and switch over to the stock bike. So over here, what I'm going to do is go through some of the wiring features on those safety switches and things. So we'll get set up on the other side here, and I'll get the camera close to the relay that's under the seat. And then each time that I defeat the safety circuit, you'll hear that relay cut on and off. And so then you'll know if all the switches are working just because you can hear it. Because the stock bike, this one's got a loud relay, so you can actually hear it click on camera, so it works out pretty good. And then we'll go over a little bit of what it takes just to actually get one of these motors to run. It doesn't take much, and so we'll list out the items necessary to make one of these run, and then also go through one that's, if everything looks right and it still just doesn't want to run, then it may be something with the spark timing. And that'll tell us if we got a bad TCI or maybe we got the coil swapped around. So let's get set up and go through this safety circuit, and then we can see how that works. All right, so we are looking at the stock bike here, and it's got all its original wiring and everything. So hopefully on the camera, back here underneath the seat is the safety circuit relay. And so if everything is good, once you got all your wiring, and we'll move things around and you'll hear it tick, then that safety circuit should click each time. So when I turn the key on, you hear it click. So it went click, and we'll get the camera in there real close so you can hear it. Now let's get just tip it down here and you'll hear it when I click it. So we'll show what each of the safety switches does, and then you'll hear that relay click each time. So right now, I'm in neutral, and I turn the key on and you hear it click, click. All right, so we're in neutral, so if I start, it would start. So say I can bump it and it'll start. All right, so the first one is naturally this one. So this switch right here, if you turn that off, you hear that relay. And so if it's in this position, it ain't gonna start. Not gonna get nothing. So in the run position, so that's one of them. So if you don't get a click when you move that on that relay, then maybe something wrong with that switch. The next one is, of course, the side pedal kickstand. And so right now I'm in neutral, so with the kickstand down it would actually start, right? But if I have the stand down and I'm not in neutral, so I move it out of neutral, you'll hear that relay. I'll do it just so it doesn't click, so you'll hear the relay. Right there. So right when I take it out of neutral, you'll hear it. So if the side stands down and you're in gear, you don't get to start. So you got to have it in neutral with the side stand down. So that's the next one. All right. So then let's say your side stands up and you're in gear, even with the side stand up, it's not going to start because you can hear it as soon as I take it out of neutral. You can hear that relay. Right? So it's not in neutral and it still won't start. So in neutral, with the stand up, it'll start. Right? All right, so you can, with it up on the bike and in gear, get it back in get it back in gear. Now, if you pull the clutch in, you'll hear that relay click. And so even in gear, if you pull the clutch in, it'll start. So without the clutch, won't start. Pull the clutch in, and it'll start. So there we go. So that's how that safety circuit works. And you can kind of run down through there, but the biggest thing is when you click the key, you ought to hear that relay come on. So now we're going to go through what it takes to actually make a motor run and what are the key things that has to be to get the bike to run. So we'll get set up over here and we'll do some looking at that. All right, so just what does it take to make a motor run? Well, it's pretty simple and it holds true for most every compression motor. You need 4 things. And so you got to have compression, engine timing, fuel, got to get some fuel to it, and you got to be mixed right, and you got to have a spark, and you have to have spark timing. So over here is kind of what it is to get one running. Like when I'm rebuilding this cafe, first off you got to get it running, then you can get it running right. So to get it running, just to see if it's going to run, if it's going to fire up and do all that, you kind of got some parameters. So for compression running, just to get it running, it needs to be about above 90 psi, somewhere around there. Anything lower than that, it's going to struggle, but it'll fire up at about 90. The engine timing just has to be right. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You got to have your timing right. The fuel, you can't have air leaks coming up from your carbs to your cylinders. You got to get the bowl height right because there's little emulsion tubes inside of there, and if the fuel is too low, it'll suck air through the emulsion tube and you won't get the right mix, and it ain't gonna fire. And you gotta have clean carbs. So those are kind of the basics on the fuel to get started. Spark is also got a little category of spark timing. So you gotta have a strong spark, plugs aren't fouled, you know, the basic stuff like that. The one that a lot of folks miss is sparking at the correct time. Now if you're not doing a out of the box rebuild, you know, if you got a bike that is all together, you don't have to worry too much about that, because most likely everything is still set right and it's going to trigger and spark when it's supposed to. But if you're doing a build where you got pieces or you're putting bikes together, one of the things that's missed a lot is the spark timing, because it can be different based on what pieces you use off the bike. And then last, you got the TCI voltage. You need to be above about 10 volts. That's why those little stabilizers seem to work pretty good. A good strong battery. You can't jump one of these from a car battery because it drops the voltage down too low. You need to have a good battery on the bike, or some method to pretend that the battery you're using is the bike's battery. They just don't jump very good. And then we move over to running right. So once you get it running and you're pretty happy that you got it to fire up and you're like, okay, yeah, this is a good project, and that's where I'm going to be when I first start doing the wiring. To get it running right, you got to go a little further. So, you know, compression needs to be above about 110 psi. That's going to give you a good fire. You got to adjust your valve clearance, get the timing right on the valve so you get good compression. And you need to worry a little bit about exhaust back pressure, because that helps the motor to run. Same for here though, the timing just has to be. For the fuel mix, now you got to worry to get it running right. You got to worry about your jetting, make sure you don't have holes in your diaphragms, your carbs are synced right, idle circuits tuned, you know, everything's really good on the carburetors, and you won't have any issues. And then for the spark and spark timing, it's the same. It's one of those that just has to be in order to make the bike run right. So out of all those, compression's pretty easy. Get your compression tester, you can check it. Engine timing, there's videos on how to set the engine timing. Get all that set right. Fuel, you know, you can go through and check your whole fuel systems and all that. Spark, you can check with a little inline spark checker, but the spark timing is the one that we're going to look at here in just a minute, and I'm going to show it on the stock bike. The one thing that the safety circuit does is it can't kill the compression, it doesn't affect the timing, it can't cut the fuel off. All that circuit can do is cut your spark. So once you're sparking, now you got to figure out, are you sparking at the right time. So we'll set up over here and we'll get a timing light and we'll show how to check your spark timing, and then some of the things that might be throwing that spark timing off. We'll be back here in just a minute. Alright, so we are back over on the stock bike to kind of show the timing and how it works on the ignition timing, and how to check to make sure you got the coils right and you got the right TCI's working, all that stuff if you're doing, you know, an out of the box kind of parts rebuild. And so what we're going to do is set up basically I got my timing light, and so it's hooked to the battery, and then one hooks to the plug wire for the rear cylinder. And so inside of here, you know, where you set your timing, you had the T for the rear cylinder and then the line for the front. There's also a mark on there that's got an F, and that's for your firing position for this cylinder right here. So that lets you know whether or not these coils are swapped, or if you're getting any fire at all, because if it is firing the plug, it should light the light. So let's get it set up and zoom down in here and see if we can get a good angle. I'll fire the bike up, and then you'll be able to see the little F in the window as it goes by. Alright, so we're zoomed in on our little window there, and what we want to do is start the bike up, and you won't see anything until I turn the strobe on. So let's fire the bike up, and then I'll show you what it's supposed to look like when it runs. Alright, so right now you can't see anything because it's spinning around in circles. But when I take the strobe and I put the strobe light on it, right there is the F with the two lines for fire. So I'll zoom in a little bit more, see if I can get a clear shot of it. Hang on just a second. Right there. So what that tells you is that it's firing the rear cylinder with that double line, and so everything's in time. Alright, so let's just say, for example, when I did my bike build, I have a spark, and seems like it ought to run because I got spark, I got fuel, I got everything going on. But let's just say, for example, that these coils are reversed. There we go. So now I got my coils reversed, which is a common mistake that can be made. Alright, so now let's go back over here and see if the bike will start. And of course we know it won't start because the coils are backwards. But I can show you what it looks like in the window when the coil is not firing at the right time. Let's see if I'm getting the light right. Alright, so here we go. This is with the coils wired backwards. See, it doesn't want to fire. And see, so it almost sounds like it wants to hit, but it's not hitting. And that's simply because the spark is not sparking at the right time. And if you looked in the video, you didn't see the F up in the window because it's not sparking at the right time. So all we got to do is swap the coils back. So now, other than the fact that I probably flooded it a little bit, when I fire it up, that F's going to come back up in that window again. There we go. So there you go. So you can see the F and the two lines. So swapping those coils makes it fire at the right time. So it's absolutely important that you get your spark timing, especially on a build where everything's took apart and you're swapping parts out. So if it's not starting and you got fuel and you got everything set up and you got spark and it's just not wanting to hit, that's the thing I would check, is make sure that your spark timing is correct, that your TCI is firing when it's supposed to, and everything's working good. And hopefully that'll help somebody out. Alrighty, well, thanks for watching.